Hey, deserving listeners, the Ultimatum. It's the end of the whole season, so let's see what happens.
Like, I was doing myself for a while. Just like, I'm shutting everybody out. I'm trying to find out what I really want, what makes me happy, because that was definitely disregarded the previous 2 years. And
You're giggling.
Interesting. So Jake is saying that he's saying sort of indirectly, but directly enough about his relationship with April, that she disregarded his feelings or his wants or him. And he is now saying that of her. And that's still his narrative. He was saying that before. He feels hurt by that and bothered by that, resentful of that perhaps. And April, I think, doesn't agree with that and is laughing at that. Okay. So I think this shows that the two of them still have a lot of anger and hurt towards each other. Let's see what she says.
And I feel like we were both putting the shit on the stick. Like, you walk in and boom, the first date we go to meet everybody, our partners are instantly like, just watching their date back, it makes so much sense now. You guys do have a lot in common. Watching it unfold, I could tell immediately when Jake and I moved in that he wanted to be back with Ray. And
okay, so that's April's story, and Jake is like, no, that's not true. And I could imagine that not being true. And it's a common thing that we will do. Maybe give you a hypothetical. You are being broken up with. It's a difficult breakup. It's hurtful. And then you start replaying in your mind different events, and you start thinking, oh, did he cheat on me? Was that what happened? And there was that one thing that happened. That must have been it. There's a temptation, I think, to look to these big events to explain what happened, because when we're dumped, it feels like, wait, what happened? I don't understand. We had love for each other. Something must have occurred. I need a simple story, because a complicated one or an unknown one doesn't feel very good.
I was very distraught. I was at my lowest point, probably realizing, all right, this has already been checked out. Being at my lowest, instead of my person I walked on with checking in with me, like seeing him check in with Ray, I know that they had a connection, but like watching that, it felt disrespectful. It felt like my 3 weeks was taken when I was with Jake. Jake was out checking on Ray. And
disrespectful, maybe, but it's part of the show, right? That's the premise, that if you meet someone else and you have a connection, then you're likely to continue to communicate with that person. I'm curious as to what agreements everyone had. That's been a huge question for me. A lot of the accusations and the hurt is debatable, or at least the premise behind the hurt is debatable, because I'm wondering, well, what were the rules? Because this show really breaks the assumptions, the unwritten. When you start dating someone, you say, let's be exclusive, for example. From that point forward, it's assumed, not always the case, that you're not going to be with other people. And that if you do, in your mind, decide to be with other people, you will tell that person. Again, not everyone does that. But that's the unwritten rule. You don't need to wake up every morning with that person and say, so let's review the rules. You're not going to be with anyone else. And if you have an impulse, you're going to tell me, that kind of thing. And I will do the same. There's an assumption based on our culture, different protocols and relationships that we just take for granted. And the show throws all that out the window. So was it wrong for Jake to reach out to Ray while Jake was back with April? Or was that part of the whole thing? Is that part of the whole reason why they're on the show? I don't know.
And how things were going on with Zay, and I didn't get those 3 weeks with Jake.
Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Why'd you bring me on the show?
I brought you on the show because I wanted to marry you.
You did?
I'm glad you didn't propose, because I don't want to be 5 years later divorced to you and I'm unhappy and I'm forcing you to do stuff.
Interesting. So I think Jake is, accusing her or implying that she wasn't on the show for a legitimate reason, that she went on the show to be famous. A lot of people will do that. I think that's what Jake is accusing. Let's see what happens.
But I was already trying to do
I'm glad
that.
Do you see what I'm saying? The whole purpose of this was we weren't compatible, and there's things that you wanted that I wasn't taking into consideration. So I do apologize, but I'm glad we won the experience. I want to marry the right person. And so looking at it at the end of the day, I feel like the experience did what it was supposed to do, and as heartbreaking as it was.
She is talking a lot again and just saying a lot of the kinds of pontifications that people will say. But I wonder what Jake is getting at here. It sounds like maybe what he's saying is when they started dating other people and then when they were back together, he was getting the vibe that she was trying to sabotage the whole situation because she wasn't really into it from the beginning, and she just wanted to be on the show, and she knew the relationship was going to be over. Is that what is? I don't know. I'm reading a lot into it, but let's see what happens.
I just don't like how you're going across like, oh, we had this perfect relationship, and then I went on the show and just like, fuck you, because it's not. And I was already trying to do everything in my power, kids, house, car, marriage, all that already previously. So the fact that you didn't care about any of that and you total disregard of all my feelings towards you.
You hear what he's saying. Now, it could be true. I have a hard time believing that it's that bad. Now, it's normal for during a breakup to have a pretty severe or exaggerated narrative for a time. Maybe it'll last, but he has been saying this from the very beginning, that she always disregards his feelings. She never listens to him, and there's probably some truth to that. I could see that, but it's starting to sound like this is more of a schema of his, meaning that early in life he experienced exactly what he's describing, and it locked in this assumption about what's happening in the world and produced an unmet need that is constantly in pain, and he just sees the world through that lens. That would be my guess. Of course, I don't know that, but it's starting to sound like that.
Just showing me not wanting to be there, and how you knew I was not comfortable at all going on to this, just saying, fuck you, I want to do this anyways. I'm going to do it
And I
my own
apologize
thing.
for your
So,
moment, but I put my foot down. And if you were buying Ray a car, if you were buying her a house, why was it so fucking hard to marry me?
Okay, there's a number of things here. He is saying that she forced him to be on the show, and then she's saying that thing she said at the very beginning of the season, saying, I don't understand, if it's so easy for you to buy me a car, how come you can't marry me? Yeah, I said it back then, that is based on a premise that not everyone would have, which is that to buy a gift for a partner, even if it's really expensive, is somehow only going to occur when you plan on marrying someone, which, isn't true.
You brought me on the show with total disregard of my feelings. Like, I never wanted to go on the show in the first place.
Jake, we hear you, and I think everyone...
So he's saying that you totally disregarded my feelings, you forced me to be on the show, and that sounds like an interesting narrative, right? That now, who knows? Maybe if I were to talk with them, I would go, wow, she really is a mean person that doesn't listen to your feelings. And wow, she really did force you and used a lot of coercion and a lot of power and a lot of fear-based tactics to get you to go on the show. But that doesn't sound like the most accurate description. He could have refused to be on the show, right? He could have said to her, no, I don't want to be on the show. And he could have said, if that means that you're going to break up with me, then I guess that's what it means, because I don't want to. I mean, was that not an option?
In fact, we have a clip. Let's watch.
She dragged me on. I'm not the one who gave the ultimatum, you know what I mean? So she dragged me onto this. She's dragged me on this thing. As you know, I got dragged on this. I didn't even want to be here. I got dragged on the...
Okay, so they're doing a supercut edit of him frequently talking about that. And now maybe he's exaggerating. Maybe he'll say, I'm exaggerating. It wasn't like she forced me at gunpoint to be on the show, but she did pressure me. But this does lend itself to the hypothesis that he has a narrative, he has a schema that he's applying to situations, because that would be in line with what I believe his schema is, which is that people don't care about his feelings. Some of you might actually have that schema because of your early childhood experiences. And when your partner is maybe being mildly discounting of your feelings, it will become exaggerated, and you'll be hurt times 10, and then you'll be angry times 10 or rejecting times 10, while your partner is like, why is this happening? So I don't know, but we can use this as a jumping off point to think about our own schemas. And that is a schema that you can adopt. Essentially what happens is you're young and you are being treated in a way that discounts your feelings. And you're 0 to 5, and you're having all these urges to share how you're feeling through various different methods to get some attunement and attention and love and warmth and understanding, and you are frequently being frustrated with that. And so over time, the child learns, look, the way the world works, I'm learning how the world works, I'm learning how to talk, I'm learning how to walk, And I'm learning the emotional landscape, which involves a denying of my feelings. No one cares about my feelings. In fact, I have to really remember that no one cares about my feelings, because when my feelings come up, I need to refrain myself from actually expressing my feelings, because I'm not going to get my needs met. So I have to really beat it into my head. Remember, remember, remember. No one cares about your feelings. No one cares about your feelings. And then from that belief system comes a lot of coping mechanisms. I don't know what his would be. I don't think we've necessarily seen them. Maybe it's a protest coping style where he is frequently protesting against people and saying, you never care about my feelings. And then maybe that would elicit at least some attunement because they're being guilted or something. So that would be, but we don't know that much about Jake. And then later on in life, when you are experiencing maybe the normal ups and downs of relationships and your partner does care about you, to some extent you are seeing it as if they just do not care about your feelings, because that belief system was locked in when you're growing up. The other thing is that you can do subconsciously is, because you have that assumption about the world, it feels comfortable for you to recreate it, and you will sniff out individuals on Tinder who actually will have either subconscious signs or overt signs that they are going to participate in that dynamic of denying your feelings. So who knows? But Jake could have been actually attracted to April initially because he detected signs that she might actually not care about his feelings or be not extremely warm to him. And so this is why a lot of us are doomed to have a pattern of dysfunctional relationships until we heal and become aware of what our issues are.
Experience, I'm taking it in full.
One, she dragged me on this, and two, we agreed to go in this full force.
She gave the ultimatum. I didn't. I got dragged onto this. She dragged me on not dragged me, but she wanted me to do this.
Yeah, they're laughing at him, but as I've been saying before, when the cast members will talk with me about what it's like to be on the show, they are filming like almost 24/7, and there's frequently these scenes where they're like, okay, tell us what's going on, and tell us again that you were forced on the show, because that needs to be a reminder to the audience. And then they just get piles and piles of footage, and then later on they edit it. So I'm guessing that if you looked at every one of these cast members, there would be a certain bullet point that is frequently repeated because the producers are frequently asking them. Now, maybe this is his sort of repetitious assertion, but I'm guessing it's more a product of cajoling by the producers.
I didn't want to do this. I didn't give the ultimatum. I got pulled onto this experience, and I accepted it with open arms.
There's another possibility that he doesn't want to come across as someone who would want to be on a reality TV show or something, and he feels compelled to assert that frequently, like he feels insecure. I don't know.
Whoever ends up choosing April is going to be with April. April is a firecracker. Got to be just as adventurous and loud as April. My last relationship, I had to leave a little bit of April behind.
It's not a strong indication, but it is a small yellow flag of narcissism when people refer to themselves by their own name. This heuristic is overused. Someone will do this and it's like automatically that person's narcissistic. And it's not necessarily true. There are cultural reasons for this. There are contextual reasons to do this sort of thing. I don't know about April, but I can talk about the small little yellow red flags of narcissistic personality. And this is very different from the way people typically talk about narcissism on the internet. But I don't know why I always point over here for the internet. My computer screen is over here. So it's like, there's the internet. I guess I'm on the internet. So the internet's all around. Anyway. There are some red flags that April exhibits. One is that she talks a lot and in a way that actually annoys other people seemingly. Now, why do narcissistic people do that? Well, there are different levels of narcissism. At even lower levels, people with narcissistic personality there's a compulsion to take up space. One way to look at it is that we all have a need to be heard. Right? We all have a need to take up space. When we're in a social situation or a romantic relationship or we're at the doctor's office, we there's some level of need that we have around, I have something to say, or I need to share this, or I want to hear my own voice, or whatever. And for some people, they have very little need for that, introverted people in particular. But they still have some need for that. So we all have a need for that. And when you are raised in a way that makes you feel like you generally don't matter, then one of the coping mechanisms is to just really take up a lot of space, and you're almost running from the deficit of need that you had when you're growing up. Let me explain. So one way to visualize it is that for a child, there's a container, and you have to fill that container with love and attention and giving the child a voice and really responding to them, attuning to them. Because kids can talk a lot, that's one thing, or express themselves a lot, but they need to be heard and understood and held. And if your glass is only half full by the time you reach a certain age, and because it's harder to make up for that when you're older, there's certain emotional developmental containers, if you will, if I'm going off this metaphor, that need to be filled. And if they don't get filled by that age, it's really hard to fill them later on. When you're an adult, you are always operating as if your container is half full, even when you're getting a lot of attention and you're taking up a lot of space. But you always have this sense like, well, I'm not getting the attention that I want. I'm not getting the attention that I need. And of course, what can happen is when you blast people with a lot of words, people start to abandon you and they stop listening. They start to get angry at you. And of course, this results in feeling more of your attention meter is low. And so you just talk more and more and more and more and more. So it's a compulsion, and it's also a style that they probably developed when they were very young. When they were, 3 years old, 5 years old, they were denied the attunement they were looking for. And so they learned if they just take up a lot of space, eventually they'll get a little bit more attunement, not enough, but a little bit more, especially compared to if they just act normally and quietly. Also, we might use our own name when we're referring to ourselves because it kind of distances ourselves from ourselves. When people suffer from narcissism, they actually are actively trying to distance themselves from their own emotions because they learned when they were growing up that no one will be attuned to that. And so one of the ways you can kind of do that is to refer to yourself from a distance. Anyway, another thing is you will elevate the self. There's something, not always, but there's something elevating about referring to yourself. We also might be able to take Jake's words and think, maybe at least from Jake's perspective, that she just wanted to be on the show to be famous. He didn't say that, but why else would you force someone to be on a show when you don't really want to be with them? I think that's what Jake was saying. So at least for Jake, he's making that, I think, accusation, and of course that would lend itself to narcissism. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be on a reality show, but it's another thing to be so desperate to be on one that you would fake and lie and harm your partner in the process and force them, so to speak, to be on the show. Another aspect of narcissism, tiny little yellow flag, is you will make other people around you feel like they don't matter. You either by belittling them or just making them feel like they're just not relevant. And you could imagine how Jake might have experienced that and might exaggerate that to some extent, but at the very least experience that and will say the things that he's saying, like I never matter, my feelings don't matter, that kind of stuff. But I will say that there's not a lot of indications that if she is on the narcissistic personality spectrum that she's very high. If she were higher, we would see other kinds of symptoms.
He's finally opening his eyes to April.
I'm not here to be wild, April.
How does Colby truly feel about April?
April doesn't really let who April is out.
And go out there and learn April. Who's April and where does April come from?
Where does April need to be?
April doesn't want to be here. He's gotten to know April, more of a listening.
I think another element to why it's narcissistic, why they would even do that from a narcissistic motivation, is they're trying to make a declaration about themselves. It's saying, look, this is how April is. April is this way, especially if you're trying to make someone just accept, look, April is very talkative. April is going to talk. You're just going to have to deal with it.
Side of April, opposite of April. What the hell is going to happen to April? I'm going to focus on April because I'm being myself. Like, this is April.
Now, that is telling. telling because I've been saying with the other supercuts that the producers are going to ask Nate about the kid issue. Perhaps the producers were asking Jake, did you really want to be on the show? And so he's prompted to say that thing. I'm pretty sure the producers wouldn't prompt April to refer to herself in the third person. So of all the supercuts, this one seems the most accurate to her personality.
Present you for the Guinness World Record, talking about yourself in the third person.
When did that start in your life? Like, I remember that we sat down for our first dinner and she was like, April's gonna, I was like, I thought that was April. He's like, it is April. And I'm like, oh, I gotcha.
I will tell you when that started, when I started dating 8 random strangers at one time and they're like, who is April? I had to start selling her.
Did it really?
So she's saying, I had to start selling her. I don't know. That seems dubious. Maybe hopefully we'll get some more. Now, if she's not aware of her personality issues, she's not going to have a good explanation.
Start from this show?
No.
Oh, wait.
I have never in our relationship been like, hey, Jake, April's kind of hungry. Let's go.
Right, so Jake is saying maybe she didn't refer to herself in the third person, but it's always been about April. It's always about her. It's about her needs. It's about her experience. She doesn't take the time to listen. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.